Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Dallessandro, and as the presenter for today, I am happy to be discussing artificial intelligence in my basic legal research class. So here is the agenda for today. I'm going to start by giving you the context where our basic legal research class fits into our Elon Law program, how we incorporated artificial intelligence into the class, and then I'll end with some reflections on what I plan to do in the future. So for context, the law program at Elon is unique among law schools because it lasts 2.5 years instead of the more typical 3. We divide our curriculum into trimesters instead of semesters, with a 12-week fall trimester, a 10-week winter trimester, and a 10-week spring trimester. The reasoning for that is to save students time and money. They don't have to stay at school for an extra semester, and they have the option to take the bar in February if they wish. So now for where our basic legal research class fits into the program. I am one of 4 dual degree librarians who teaches this course. It is a mandatory 1-credit course that all first-year students must take in their fall trimester. And we teach it using a flipped classroom model. So before class, we expect students will have done readings. This past year, we used basic legal research in a nutshell. And we asked them to bring any questions to class. And during the class, we take those questions, we review the readings, usually in both a PowerPoint lecture and a short demonstration for finding, say statutes on Lexis or updating cases on Westlaw. And then we give the students an in-class assignment. They can do that either individually or in groups. And then we get together at the end of the class and we discuss what they found. So the class before AI consisted of several major components. We taught them the research process, analyzing their facts, using secondary sources to find primary sources, updating their findings. We teach them secondary sources, focusing primarily on restatements, American law reports, annotations, legal periodicals, encyclopedias, and treatises. And we also teach them primary sources at both the state and federal levels. And then in 2022, artificial intelligence arrives with the debut of ChatGPT, and Lexis plus AI was not far behind. So we librarians had to decide whether we were going to incorporate AI at all, and if so, how we were going to do it. So our first step was to look to our parent institution's policy. What does Elon University require that we do, if anything? So Elon University has responded with a statement on AI. This statement emphasizes the primacy of human health, well-being, dignity, safety, privacy, and security. It asserts that AI literacy is an essential part of an Elon education, while at the same time stressing that students' personal information has to be respected. And finally, use is at the discretion of the faculty. So now that we have this discretion, how do we use it wisely? So we decided we couldn't ignore it, in part because students already had access to Lexis plus AI and were using general purpose AI such as ChatGPT. We decided to take our federal administrative law and North Carolina administrative law sections and combine them to give us time to discuss AI, because we couldn't add in another class, and everyone knows how happy students would be if we had tried to do that. We also had to choose readings and to come up with an in-class assignment for them to do. So the readings I chose included an article titled Mastering AI Prompts, because I thought this would give students a good grounding into how to word their prompts. Those prompts are really key to having them get good answers. I also included their student guide to AI from Elon University because that provided direction on topics such as career planning and studying and how to use it without being accused of plagiarism. Finally, because they are going to be lawyers in the future, I included the Fifth Circuit's AI policy to show them how courts are dealing with this in the real world. So I continued to teach the class with this flipped classroom model. After they did the readings, I did a 20 to 25 minute lecture and also a small discussion where I defined AI and talked about the different types of AI. So we were all on the same page on what the class was going to be about. I talked about the strengths and weaknesses of AI. And I also talked about this MATA case, which dealt with the attorneys who used those cases. They use those hallucinated cases. So these are the types of AIs I touched on: the general purpose and the legal AIs. Co-counsel hadn't arrived yet, but just flag that for their knowledge. I talked about the strengths of AIs, which include increasing productivity, increased availability. Unlike librarians and professors, AIs don't need sleep, and greater data acquisition and analysis. I also pointed out the weaknesses of AIs to them: the hallucinations, which everyone has heard about. They're also prone to bias. They raise privacy concerns around data. Where are they getting their information? And environmental concerns. I specifically highlighted that LexisAI can perform research and summarize. It can draft documents such as memos and emails. It does offer greater privacy and security, and it draws on legal sources because it's been working with legal materials for years. So we talked about the MATA case, which dealt with the hallucination of cases. And I also asked them to discuss with me what the court decided, were they right, and what was their reasoning for it, the mistakes the attorneys made and the harms that resulted. And I asked them, if they had been a partner in the firm, what would they have done differently? So this was the second part, the in-class assignment. I told them to put this in both a free AI of their choosing and the Lexis AI. So I told them, pretend you're writing a legal memorandum about grandparents seeking custody of their grandchildren in North Carolina. Grandparents would like custody of their grandchildren. The children's mother is dead. The father has inconsistent contact, does not pay child support, and hasn't visited in years. The grandparents helped take care of the children when their mother was alive and has taken care of them since her death. I need to find primary law on this topic. So I told them, before class, you have to choose a free AI, sign up for it. And then I gave them about 20 to 25 minutes for them to put the prompt into both LexisAI and the free AI of their choice. And as a further step to compare the results of the LexisAI and the free AI with the memo our TA had written on this topic. And we had gone through the memo ourselves, so we knew the statutes were good, the cases were good, and that it all made sense. So we knew what they should find. And then at the end, I brought them together to talk about their results. And they were surprised to get different answers from the same AI for the same prompt. So two students would put this prompt into ChatGPT or Claude, and they'd get different answers. And they were like, well, how did this happen? And they also noticed that some of the cases and statutes were hallucinations. You know, they couldn't find a case that ChatGPT had cited on Westlaw or Lexis. And then we all came to the conclusion that case must not exist because we can't find it anywhere. So for the future, staying current is key because the technology changes so fast. Lexis has gone from Lexis plus AI to Lexis Protege. Plus, we didn't have Westlaw co-counsel at the time. And now that is here, we have to figure out some way of incorporating that into the class. I'm debating whether to have them use a free AI model and Lexis, or combine, or have them do Lexis and Westlaw and see which comes up with better results. But either way, I think teaching students to evaluate the currentness and relevancy and significance of their sources is still really important. This is a tool for them and for us. And if you have questions, please ask me afterwards or email me. My email is right there. So thank you and have a wonderful day. So questions?
You said the class session you devoted to this topic was administrative law. Your hypo wasn't administrative law. Do you still cover administrative law? Do you try to do both? What you?
I meant that we moved the administrative law.
Okay.
So typically we cover federal administrative law in one class session, say class 9. And then we'll do North Carolina administrative law in class 10. We couldn't add on another class session. So we decided we were going to put both the federal and the state administrative law into one class session, and that opened up time for us to discuss AI. Yes.
So when you introduce basic searching, so you're teaching the, Boolean searches and natural, do you also add a segment where you're now teaching how to draft an AI prompt?
That is also something we're considering doing. We want to keep teaching them keyword searching because we don't know in the future what kind of access they're going to have to resources, if they're going to have access to LexisAI or Westlaw Co-Counsel, or if they are going to be restricted to keyword searching, if they're going to be able to use all of it, but we want them to be prepared for anything. So we couldn't include it this time around, but in the future, I think we will have to include drafting that prompt because that is, I think, key to them getting the right and relevant answers. Yes.
If you talk about teaching them the Lexis fast case, because most lawyers, they don't have at least access to fast case for free through their bar associations. And they have AI built in. I don't know if the AI is available for free, but it's not a book.
I think Vincent is LexisAI, and the last time I checked, they're charging $400 a month. So I think they're the exception to what you said yesterday, that everybody's losing money. I think maybe because of the way BLX is funded, they're refusing to lose money.
Okay.
So I personally think they're missing out because everybody's gonna have to pick their tool of choice. Even if they have the best tool, nobody's gonna know about it from the student, the students matriculating in practice, but it seems
Yeah.
to.
Obviously, I don't use fast case, even though I.
I was gonna lean over and ask you if you knew that Vincent was charging $400 a month.
No, I did not know
was
that.
charging $400 a month, Vincent's
I
done.
don't think that's right.
I don't think it's funny, they were so high.
Well, our students have access to fast case through their student North Carolina Bar Association membership.
Yeah, it probably doesn't work very often, yeah.
That I don't. Yeah, I don't think they have access to that.
Which is a business choice.
Well, we have to follow up. And what about like Google? So you mentioned and ChatGPT and Claude. But the Google Gemini, at least they have some access to Google Scholar. They have the cases there, which they're good, but they're not up to date with existence. Have you tried using Google Gemini or having people use multiple free ones and go? Because you can't trust ChatGPT. But you can go to ChatGPT and then check with Gemini and sort of bounce around them till see a combo can beat out Lexis.
I remember that some students used Google Gemini as well. I haven't given them an exercise where they've had to go between two free ones. We only have so much time and we wanted to have them look at the LexisAI in part to get them used to it. And to see, the difference in a legal specific AI versus a more general.
Okay. Was the purpose of the exercise more to, clearly it was to teach, to inform, but sort of from the readings and something Tim just said, made me think of this. Was it really like, was there this undercurrent of, hey, you need to be very, very careful if you're going to use these tools? Or was it really more of an experiment to compare the open versus the Lexis, the law specific? And how may that change over time as everything improves?
It was both. We wanted them to see that, they really have to be careful with this. And some of them wrote to me and said, hey, the TA did a great job with this memo. There are things that like the Lexis left out or the ChatGPT left out, but it was supposed to be a lesson about how they need to be really careful. And one reason I included that New York case is that the duty to do legal research competently and to stay current, that's an ethical duty of a lawyer. Yes.
How did the students respond to, because like one of the biggest challenges I found when teaching them is explaining how Lexis and Westlaw do not contain everything. Like running a search on one of them does not mean you're searching everything. And the AI tools within that don't search everything within either Lexis or Westlaw. So how did the students kind of respond to like those boundary sort of things where like, again, kind of emphasizing more, it is a tool, it's not a complete tool, you still have to do all of this other stuff. So really, it's kind of more work to double check it.
Well, throughout the class, we explained to them that Lexis and Westlaw do not have everything in general, and that they are rivals. And rivals do not share. And I also tell them that Lexis and Westlaw are in the habit of suing each other for things such as page numbers. So, and I tell them that over and over, especially when we're covering the secondary sources, because, for example, one database Westlaw has our state-specific encyclopedia, Strong's North Carolina Index 4th, and the other does not. So that is, to me, a good example of they don't have everything. And then telling them that the AIs don't search everything and Westlaw and Lexis don't search everything, you do get some groans and some unhappy looks and some pouts because they think, you know, with the right keyword search or the right prompt search, they should be able to get everything at their fingertips. And that just is not the case. So it's about stressing to them continually and to remember that you're not always going to find everything the first time around, and you have to keep looking and make sure you cover all your bases.
Sort of follow up on that, I think, so I agree, I think with the AI stuff is true, but the other point I think is somewhat related is that the AI searches and updates, they're not current. All the data is always delayed, so any newer cases that are coming out, you know, whether it's a day, 2 days, or a week, it's not right away. So it's worse than a keyword search. At least keyword searches, Boolean stuff, at least you can get the latest cases. But the West and Lexis stuff, you know, they don't get into the index right away. There's that delay part. So everyone, I don't know how important that is to be at the exact moment of current time, but it might be important.
Now, we do stress to them that they have to be careful and that things can lag and the AIs can lag. And I got some disbelieving looks like, what? The AI should be current like that. Like, no, it's not. And a big part of this is managing their expectations and making sure they know these caveats exist so they don't come back to me and say, Professor, this happened and I didn't find the right case, but I told you there were going to be gaps. So, yes.
I can envision, because we're telling them, hey, you have to be careful utilizing AI. You need to double check. But here's what I envision if I were to implement this for students of, they're going to say, how far down the rabbit hole do I need to go to continue to check and check and check? I mean, where is that? Where does that actually stop?
Well, we had an advantage with this problem because we had worked it throughout the class. So they were going in knowing there were some statutes and some cases that they should find in either the free AI model or the Lexis AI model. And one thing we always tell them when they're doing legal research is if you keep getting the same results, you're doing good searches, you've got relevant keywords, you've got a good prompt if you're doing AI, and everything keeps throwing back the same cases and statutes, then you're pretty much done. You know, and they also do have timelines and deadlines for assignments. They'll never have an infinite amount of time to do these sorts of projects. So that's kind of the baseline we give them. Are you getting the same cases and statutes over and over again? Yes.
So I ran a somewhat similar exercise, but with my advanced legal research class. And in terms of showing them that not everything is included, I selected a prompt that, or selected a back scenario where it involved ordinances and looking at basically a company's website, so stuff that wouldn't have been in Lexis, and had them run the prompts in both either ChatGPT or in Gemini, and then they also ran it in Lexis, and it just showed them that you have to use more than one tool. You can't, even if you're in Lexis, you're never gonna pull back those ordinances because they're just not included. But then you're not getting all of the primary sources that you really need from ChatGPT and Gemini. So that was kind of a way I got at some of that, but my question is, did you have additional classes after you presented the AI materials, and did you allow them to use AI for any of those classes and assignments?
We had, I think, one last class, and that was our review class, because we only have a trimester and we only do 12 weeks. So that last class we typically leave for review.
Let me ask a question following up sort of on that. Has anybody had an instance where you have the AI stuff says something that is wrong compared to like just doing your regular Lexis or Westlaw searching, and like, how have you implemented that and how have like students responded?
Well, in the hypo that I was using was for wetland permitting, and it was Westlaw Coast Co-Counsel we were using. And the summary of the case was actually the summary of the lower court case. So it had summarized the procedural history and not the actual case itself, which is a huge problem, right? So I just think they need to, so we went over that and the fact that this was wrong. But I don't think that many lawyers or students are gonna pick that up right away. I think you have to have gone through the other research, which comes back to whole life experience, because I keep thinking it's the lawyers 2022 and before, and then 2022 and later, right? And we all start in our other searches and we find our sources in a different way. And then we're double checking, so we know what to look for. What happens now forward? Will they go backwards? Like when you were saying, what's this rabbit hole? Will they go backwards? Will they check all the primary and secondary sources? I feel like you have to.
I was just as a counterpoint to that, though. I work at LAI, I don't teach students directly, but I have 2 college age students.
Okay.
And they are so skeptical of anything the internet tells them. Unlike the older lawyers from Matic age, they're like, well, the computer said it's true, it must be true. Right, so I'm actually hopeful that even if they don't necessarily have the skills to go in the library and pull the books or any of the other myriad ways they can double check, their instincts will at least be not to trust the machine because it's in their hand all the time and they know the garbage it's giving them on Instagram and TikTok. They just have that skepticism that.
That's good to know.
That-
But have you also, all right, with folks that are that age,
Yeah.
I'm also noticing a weird disconnect from my life experience to my students' life experience in print. So we're talking about citations last year, and just basic citations, the volume and page number is a concept that doesn't stick. And I'm thinking in class 1 now, at the very end of the class, I'm gonna walk them down to the library and have them all pull a book off the shelf and touch a book. It's because I don't know how to get through them.
I wrote an article on this.
Did you? Oh.
Because the citation is now a hot link,
Yes.
it's like a Wi-Fi password key. You just click on it, it takes you there, and you don't have to understand anything about the huge amount of information that tells you how old the case and where it's from and what the jurisdiction is, and all this wealth of information. And the other thing that happens is people put the whole mess into a search engine instead of just volume reporter page. And so it's a big expensive search that it may not even find it because they don't understand the magical.
But it's so broken from their life experience, like, why are we forcing this upon people now? Like, I mean, because we just had this issue with our law review, is that we had access to all of these EPUBs, and they were not happy because there wasn't pagination on them, because it was just going back, and then like we had to go and ILL PDFs of the physical books, and it's one of those where, oh my god, this is right back to the citation, like get rid of the one, because at this point, people don't understand. I mean, just think of the volume system that we have now, because there was like a certain number that was in a particular series, and then you had to move on to the next one. Like, it's so
Exactly,
divorced
the
from
more
the
you
experience.
understand print research,
But
which
why
we have
should we-
200-year history of,
But why should we force people to understand print
because
research
you
if they
need to
don't have to do
understand
it?
it. so that you can do it online.
I mean, at this point, I think it
So
should
we
be
just
more on the
project everything that
vendors
happened
to
before
have
and
to
start
change
over.
it, rather than you have to force students to learn an antiquated system that really has no impact on that. Like, why are we using that brain space when we could be using it for something else with this? And to kind of go back to my original point, I had a prompt a few. Oh God, it was like pre-COVID, so God, which one was that? Like, I don't even know what a few years is. But it was because they were using Wikipedia to try to answer a bunch of the different things with it. So I found with prohibition, the repeal amendment, in Wikipedia, there was, because I'm that much of a nerd, there was an incorrect date on that, that if you like did the research through Lexis or Westlaw, you got the correct date, and then there was a Wikipedia one. But that backfired on me. The class turned on me and they're like, well, if you knew it was incorrect, why didn't you correct Wikipedia? So and I was like, so I'm the bad person here. Okay. I was like, not that you're not doing the research.
And while that change is coming, and I do think that what you're saying is going to eventually be the future, I don't think it's happening in the next 5 years. So I do think that this is an evolution and that it is going to occur, but that we have to keep teaching the history, or else how will anyone use this material? It's sort of like us going back to old English case law. You know, we see citations and we tell them, everybody look at Beavers or something. You'll find that old citation somewhere. We know how to find it. That's what's gonna happen. It'll be like, what is that Pacific word?
We recently discontinued our West Terminal, it's been justified the expense of it, but we still maintain our print collection for our alumni that practice in the area. So we have solo practitioners who aren't part of a firm with larger subscriptions who still come in and use the print material. So we tell them on the front end, we're teaching you primarily digital research, but we are sprinkling in a little bit of the print so that you understand, so that if you do decide to start your own firm, you're still welcome to come here and do research, because we have the print volumes.
Yeah, we do something similar where we'll bring in the book, so we'll bring in the Southeastern Reporter, or we'll bring in the CFR, and we'll say to the students, do you remember what this is? This is a print book. And the nice thing with the CFR is that it changes color every year. So if you don't like this year's color, hopefully you'll like the next one better. But we do try to instill in them an awareness of, you have print materials, you have digital materials. And because we don't know what you're going to have access to in the future, we want to prepare you for anything.
And I think we can teach that print just as another way of organizing information, right? It's the same as if you go into browse a database and you have to open it up, and then you have to open the chapter and then you get to the subchapter, right? This is just an organizational scheme. You should recognize that this is for print. This is how databases are. There's organizational schemes and everything. You know, you want to order online groceries, you have to know that you have to go to Produce and then go into get, like, there's just kind of laying it like this is just how the system works in print. We're just teaching you this, and you think about organization information generally.
That's a good point. It extends well past case law and citations, because, you know, we spend a lot of time, not me personally, but the developers and engineers at LAI spend a lot of time sort of forcing the print structure that still rules the way the CFR and the US code is organized into a coherent, readable, right? You know, even things like indentation is all driven by the way it's been done for decades in print, right?
If
And
you've
that's
never
how-
used an index in a print book, it can be a little weird to try to figure out how it works online. If you don't know, if you get to a place where there's a list of guide words and you don't understand that you're supposed to pick the alphabetical chunk that relates to the word you're trying to find, there are people who get stuck at that point and don't know what to do.
Did anybody see that thing on LinkedIn? I'm guessing many have, because I think Sarah Glassmeyer was among the people that amplified it. The question on Reddit or whatever about how do people ever find anywhere driving before Google Maps, and they pay people to tell them where to go or whatever. And so I was actually thinking, as I was walking the dog or something, like, how would I explain that? And I got to this point where I was thinking about Thomas's guides. If anybody ever lived in California and had a Thomas guide, and they had an index, and I was like, well, that's no good, because these kids wouldn't know what an index is. So yeah, these print problems definitely are gonna be around a long time.
But people relied on gas stations a lot of the time.
Yeah,
for
people-
directions.
it was actually like a proof, right, that men
And it
wouldn't
was
stop
like,
and ask
your
directions.
librarian is your gas station. Pull in,
Yeah.
check in to see where you're at.
We always tell them, if you have questions, come see us, come talk to the TA when we had one. They could come to us at the reference desk. We really tried to be open and available and accessible to them.
The TA thing actually raises a point, because the other thing you see on LinkedIn is the people saying, well, ChatGPT got this right for free in a fraction of the time that my law firm tried. Well, how do you know it's right? Because you had that ground truth in the lawyer prepared memo, the same thing. And your exercise, the way you were able to, benchmark to use a word, what these AI were giving you is you had the TA do it the old fashioned way and give you a ground truth to the right statutes, to the right cases. So even if you get proficient with the new tools, you still have to use the old tools to make sure you know the tools. That's right.
I've always envisioned the classes just giving the students a group of tools and then just some really basic ground information. So teaching them some print materials, teaching them Lexis and Westlaw, and now having to teach them the AI. Part of that is just staying current on it and going to webinars on it and trying it out ourselves. And well, we try to give them a problem that we already have the answers to, not a problem that we don't know, because then just about anything could look good. So in our situation, the TA wrote the memo, and then at least two of us checked it. We checked the cases, we checked the statutes, we made sure they actually existed and that they stood for what they said they did. Not that you got a case and it's real, but the wrong proposition.
For my exercise, I ended up adding a reflection at the end because I wanted them to sort of take through it. And also to prompt discussion for class. And I had also given them the body case with some of the transcripts from the prompts, and I asked them to identify, where do you think, this attorney crossed the line? At what point did this become malpractice? Was it when he didn't check the citations? Was it using AI? Just like, what do you think was the threshold for you? And so they talked about that. And then I also asked them after we did the exercise in class, and they had done traditional research on the problem I gave them the night before, like for that class. So they knew like a little bit of the background. And I asked them, so having now used Gen AI, both Lexis and the free system, do you think you would use it again in the future? And for what? Like at what point in your research would you use it? What types of information would you feel comfortable using from it, and how would you verify that it's correct? Just to kind of walk them through it. And some of them were like, I'm never using this. Like, this is so, I spent so much time working on my prompt to try to get everything. I could have just gone and looked at secondary stores, right? And got a lot of information. All right. It seems so much faster when I just did it in Lexis. And then others were like, I gave you a pretty good list of starting points. Like, it didn't fill in everything that I had found, but it gave me a couple of things I should try. And I think that might be a good starting point. So that kind of got them thinking about what they're comfortable with too, in terms of their own research process. Plan to do that again.
I really like that idea of saying sort of at what stage did he commit malpractice or something unethical. I think as sort of a corollary task for students would be, now let's say you are a New York lawyer who primarily practices the New York state law, and you are asked to research this exact question. What would you do, and how would you avoid the same pitfalls that the student was thinking? That would be very instructive. Clearly not going to use the prompts that he did. But maybe I can still use generative AI, or maybe I want to go to a switch. So.
Is anybody's school integrated legal research and like professional responsibility, like at least kind of in this area? Cause I can see that coming out. Like, I mean, sure, there was the whole thing from the, what's her face? Whatever, when she didn't shepherdize the case and got called out, like that was the that was the clip that we used to use, but now, like, I mean. this
Marcia
is-
Clark.
Oh, just
Thank you.
yeah.
I was like, I picture that. Anyway, but I'm curious, like, if that kind of like is a future where like professional responsibility, like that class, like. Is going to have to collaborate like with the librarians or something in order to talk about like. The use of AI with it, because at this point, yeah.
So Rutgers doesn't technically, but I teach PR, legal research and writing and AI class, so I sort of. De facto.
You are the.
All those things, and increasingly I find that I have to talk about all of them all the time. And I think that's definitely the question to.
Well, I talk about professional responsibility a little bit. They haven't yet taken that. This is after their special August term, their first full trimester in law school. They haven't yet gotten to professional responsibility. But I do try to stress to them that this is part of their ethical duty as a lawyer, is to be able to competently do legal research.
No, I was just responding back to you. I had 2 professional responsibility segments. So in the first day, I talked about competence, 1.1, I had this story I like to tell them about an Atlanta law firm. And then at the end, we talk about fear. I kind of feel like that's my scary story and I want to make them not to do that. And then when we get to citators, I do still show the Marcia Clark video clip, because I kind of feel like Shepard's put together a good video and it's like when they repeat, Shepardize it, my Shepherdine lost on its found. So I say it's just a good little clip. So I guess I leave it in twice, but not a lot. No.
I used to talk about professional responsibility about if you find a case that the other side clearly doesn't know about that would help them. As an officer of the court, you have to bring it to the court's attention. And then we get into that whole discussion about you talk about it and then you explain why it doesn't fly. But now we have even more to talk about.
I also tell them that if you find a case that works against you, you have to include it and you have to figure out a way to address it or recognize it, because if you don't, your opposition will pounce on it.
But online,
Mhm.
in your main accommodate AI,
Sorry,
what changes did you make to accommodate AI?
well, we had to create a whole session for it. We had to move something because we couldn't just add a class.
But raises an interesting question though. You said you taught this at the end in response to the first class. Do you have any inkling that students were already using any of these tools in earlier assignments?
I did not. I told them, the first couple weeks, we are just going to be doing like more old fashioned. And that's just to get them into it, because at this point, this is their first trimester with us, and I'm assuming they haven't worked with Westlaw or Lexis before. I'm assuming they haven't worked with print materials before. So this is very basic class. They've never seen it before. They've never been on either database, and just really the basics. And I tell them throughout, you all are overthinking this, and I'm not trying to trick you. Keep it simple. Oh, you were first, but.
I was just gonna say, we put our AI session a little bit later in the semester, so that the theory was that by that point, they've done a significant amount of research on their own, so that they are almost subject matter experts on the topic at hand. And it helps them to spot hallucinations and spot how prompt generation can affect output. But we also recognize that they're going to use it. So I think what we do is in our first session, we kind of tongue in cheek, we know you're going to use this. But treat it, I think the analogy we use is to treat it like Wikipedia. It's a decent first place, it's a decent place to start. Just don't cite it. Just don't end there. You know, use it to come up with ideas and generate and to spur your thoughts, but don't end there, please. That's how we contend to.
And this is where I differ from one of my colleagues, because one of my colleagues likes to start with the AI. And I do not. I like to start with the old keyword searches and the Boolean operators. And then I go to the AI and I give it what I think is a decent prompt. I may tailor it a couple times. I may edit it a few times. And then I just see, do I keep getting the same results or am I getting different results? And which of these is closest to what I'm looking for?
So this may sound like overly dramatic, but like I remember when it was the students who were taught to the test started coming out, like I remember hearing rumblings from my colleagues in the university library being like, students are freaking out about research. Like this is not, they don't like it when there's not an answer. And then you got them as law students who, if you didn't have like the black letter law, like, you know, all of that stuff with it, they didn't like not having an answer and trying to find things.
Not gonna be very good litigators.
Well, I mean, but like the thing is,
Guess
though,
what?
if you, I mean, it's true, but you kind of have to meet the students where they're at with the different things. So like I have been reading on like Blue Sky, all of the different college faculty who have just been losing their minds and saying like, this has been the worst semester ever, like all this stuff. People are using AI and not realizing that it's plagiarism. People are using it like for the different thing. And like, so how much time are we going to eventually have to devote to, I guess, I'm back to like the ethical component and like how to use, because I think more and more students are going to have used some form of AI with it before they even get to the Lexis and Westlaw one. And at this point, I was like, is it an entirely separate class that you have to take to kind of do it? Because we're still having to teach them about the print foundations, about like the AI foundations, and then about like Lexis and Westlaw. As there's only so much you can squeeze into short classes.
Yes, so I can easily see us having to integrate AI prompts with Boolean operators or terms, or doing it shortly after. 'Cause I want them to have all these tools and know how to use all of them. I want them to know what Boolean operators are. But I also want them to be aware that AI can be helpful, but they can't rely on it completely. And I think the more sophisticated these tools get, the more time we will have to spend on them.
This may be way beyond what you talked for this presentation, but how do you think the NCBE could incorporate AI prompts onto the next gen boards? What kind of questions do you think they could do? Because it's got to be coming someday. It's just a question of.
I recently attended another conference where we talked about
I'm sorry, I know this is out there.
integrating
It's like-
legal research into the bar. And with some of these new people who had worked closely with the bar and who are in the process of drafting it. And to my knowledge, there isn't a good research question out there. There isn't a sample of what they would want to do. I didn't hear anything about including artificial intelligence, but I would imagine they're going to have to integrate in some way, whether they say, you know, run this in an AI search, or or even ask them like an essay question, like how would you use AI? Would you use AI, and what would be the concerns around that?
For me, I'd be a little bit, and I know you gotta teach students, but I'm a little bit less worried about the current students. I think all these kids been using AI. They've, outside of ethics, they've all been caught up in plagiarism and stuff, and high school or college, they've all been using this for papers, and they've all heard about it. And maybe they had a couple months where none of the professors knew about it, but professors were pretty on top of that once GPT 3.5 came out. And then the story started, and you have all these stories about lawyers being sanctioned and, continues as the Morgan guy a few months ago also got charged. So a little bit less worried. I think you'll have to figure out what the ethics schools are and how to teach them that, but you'll figure that out. And AI will get better and they have a sense that there's mistakes on it because they write on papers. The older lawyers out there don't have a clue. They're not all on LinkedIn. There's a whole set of people out there. And I know we all think lawyers are really on top of all this stuff, but having talked to thousands of lawyers that are in their 40s and 50s, not the case. It is really not good. There's a whole set of people that use Lexis or West because they're basically just doing the same stuff over and over again. So I think that, the current set of kids and everything, I think it'll be okay. You got probably 20, 30 years worth of attorneys that they know how to use computers now, but that's about it. They can use word processing and things. Some are still dictating into a microphone and having someone type it for them. They're not using AI for that. It works pretty well right now. Especially on the medical side, it's to be our day. So I don't know. I think maybe your alumni or something might want to get some classes out for them.
Well, there's a
That'd be good.
generation gap for sure.
Yeah. And then but they're litigating right now. I think you'll see more. The idea that something happened a couple of months ago where they're still doing this. I get the New York guy, that was early. But 2024, 2025, I don't know how you miss that with the ChatGPT.
Well, even like what we're collectively preparing to tell students in the fall. As one else, by the time they graduate, is gonna be antiquated as quickly as all of this is moving, right? When you think about the first time you address this, whether it was 2023 or 2024, and when those students are gonna graduate. Putting aside like trying to prepare them for, are they going to be in a practice environment where these tools are going to be mandatory or where they're going to be encouraged or discouraged, putting all of that aside across practice areas, the tools themselves. I sat through a webinar dating Real from VLEX, and he basically said, stop trying to learn prompt engineering, that's our job. And if we're doing our job, you can write the worst prompt in the world and we'll correct it before, we'll prompt engineer it for you. And so that first year and a half, when everybody's like, learn to be a prompt engineer, the AI Illuminati are saying, no, don't learn to be a prompt engineer. So it's changing faster and faster and faster. And I don't have any answers for how we guess what the class of 28 is going to need to know about AI in practice in 2026 when they're first year law students.
And that's why there is continuing education.
Correct.
That's what I was gonna say. This is our opportunity to train lawyers. So one of my coworkers and I, we have done a couple in the fall. We went to a family law line of court and it's great because we showed them what we do. We did some examples that were customized to issues they research, and then we talked with them about what their different firms are doing to get and see what the scope is between larger firms and solos and how people are progressing. And did the same thing, went to a public interest law day for public interest lawyers and got to see how they're using. We sat on a panel with practitioners to really get a sense of how they're using in practice, which was information then we could take back to our students and say, if you're in this type of practice setting, this is what you can expect. This is how lawyers are using it. So it works both ways. It's a way to gather intel for our students and a way for us to, hope that the folks who are employing our lawyers have a good sense of what they know coming in and what best practices are.
It would be nice if we could get a little bit of lead time and maybe like, hey, if we didn't drop new stuff in the middle of the semester, because a syllabus, what's that? That's the frustrating thing, because I know before Lexis launched theirs, they were letting the librarians do it, but the frustrating thing is they had 2 librarians who made it hallucinate. And we had the person telling us no, this product doesn't hallucinate. There's we've got 2 examples right here. They're it doesn't hallucinate. It's okay, find me this case then. Tell me this exists. So, that's kind of the frustrating thing is that I was I don't know. If it's one of those things, I was give us the time to use the product, but they don't want to, because then we find the flaws in the product. And they can't fix it until the next iteration, and we're kind of locked in, because they're you have a choice of when to turn it on. It's except not really, we're just gonna turn it on for everyone.
So for us, we waited a couple weeks before we gave them the readings. Because we wanted to see because the technology was changing so quickly, whether anything would come up that we would want them to know about. I included the reading about the Fifth Circuit policy a bit more towards the end. That was one of the last readings I picked. I think the student guide was always going to be in there as, you know, something our parent institution publishes and giving them guidance in terms of them being students, how they can use it for career planning, how they can use it for study. And the Mastering AI, we waited a little bit. We did some Google searches. We did some searching around for other articles in case there's something more relevant, more up to date. And then we just came back and said, this is the one that we think is the most succinct, because we only a 1 credit course, we want to give them, you know, digestible readings, but readings they also take something away from, readings that are meaningful. But any other questions?
It's good group therapy.
I think we've all encountered a lot of the same frustrations and challenges with teaching this, especially because it changes so quickly.
Today,
Yeah, like Ed's a couple weeks ago, that one.